Most people believe they are tired because life is hard, because work is demanding, because the world is chaotic, because responsibility never ends. But let me ask you something uncomfortable. What if you are not tired because of life, but because you are trying to control things that were never yours to control? Pause for a moment. Notice how often your mind tightens during the day, not because something happens, but because you resist what is already happening. You wake up and immediately think about what should be different. You replay conversations you cannot change. You anticipate problems that have not arrived. You try to manage how people see you, feel about you, respond to you. And this constant inner gripping, this silent effort to manage reality, slowly drains your mental energy. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply, not as a philosopher sitting in comfort, but as a man carrying the weight of an empire, war, betrayal, illness, and loss. He did not write to impress anyone. He wrote because his own mind was under pressure. And one of the most uncomfortable truths he returned to again and again was this: you are exhausted because you confuse effort with control. Effort is natural. Control is an illusion. Effort is what you choose. Control is what you imagine you have over outcomes. And the moment you tie your peace to outcomes, your peace becomes fragile. Think about it honestly. How much of your energy is spent not on action, but on attachment? Attachment to how things should turn out. Attachment to how people should behave. Attachment to how your life should look by now. You tell yourself it's responsibility. You tell yourself it's discipline. But very often, it's fear disguised as control. Fear of uncertainty. Fear of loss. Fear of being powerless. Marcus Aurelius warned that the mind becomes heavy when it carries what it was never meant to carry. You were not designed to manage the world. You were designed to manage your response to it, and there is a massive difference. Here is where most people get trapped. They believe that letting go of control means becoming passive, weak, careless. But Stoicism teaches the opposite. Letting go of control does not reduce discipline. It concentrates it. It removes wasted effort. Imagine how much mental energy would return to you if you stopped arguing with reality, if you stopped fighting yesterday, if you stopped negotiating with tomorrow. This is not about positive thinking. This is about precision, about placing your energy only where it belongs. Marcus Aurelius wrote that peace begins the moment you stop demanding that the world obey your preferences. That sentence alone threatens the modern mindset, because modern culture teaches you to manage everything: your brand, your image, your future, your happiness. But the Stoic path asks a harsher question. What if the need to control is the very thing making you tired? Be honest with yourself. Do you feel exhausted even when nothing bad is happening? Do you feel tension even during moments that should be calm? If so, that tension is not coming from life. It is coming from inner resistance, and resistance is expensive. In the next part, we will look closely at how the desire for control quietly turns into emotional exhaustion, and why most people never notice it happening. Before we move on, reflect on this. Where in your life are you trying to control outcomes instead of your response? If something came to mind immediately, that's not an accident. You can write it in the comments, even briefly. Not for others, for clarity. Most people don't decide to lose control of their energy. They trade it away quietly, bit by bit, thought by thought, reaction by reaction. Marcus Aurelius observed something most people never stop to examine. The mind is not drained by action. It is drained by unnecessary resistance. You can work long hours and still feel grounded. You can face difficulty and still feel clear, but the moment you argue internally with reality, your strength leaks out. Think about how often your day is filled with sentences like, "This shouldn't be happening. They should understand me. I can't allow this to fail. I need to fix this now." Each of these thoughts sounds harmless, responsible even, but together they form a constant inner tension, a posture of mental gripping. And here is the uncomfortable truth. Most people are tired not because they do too much, but because they demand certainty from an uncertain world. Control promises safety, but it never delivers it. It only delivers temporary relief, followed by deeper anxiety. Why? Because control depends on conditions you do not command. People change, plans collapse, bodies weaken, time passes. So every time you attach your calm to an outcome, you place your peace in something fragile. Marcus Aurelius called this a form of self-sabotage. Not because you are weak, but because you misunderstand where power lives. Power is not in forcing events. Power is in choosing your stance toward them. Here is where discipline enters the picture, and where most people get it wrong. They think discipline means pushing harder, holding tighter, enduring more. But stoic discipline is selective. It asks one ruthless question: is this within my control? Or am I wasting strength pretending it is? If it is not within your control, then obsession is not discipline. It is attachment. And attachment feels productive while quietly exhausting you. Look closely at your own patterns. Do you replay conversations in your head trying to fix what already happened? Do you imagine future scenarios and rehearse responses that may never be needed? Do you feel responsible for how others feel, react, or understand you? Each of these is an attempt to control the uncontrollable. And each one carries a cost, not immediately, but cumulatively. This is why mental fatigue builds even during calm periods. Your body might be resting, but your mind is constantly negotiating with reality. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a disciplined mind does not chase peace. It removes disturbance. That means subtracting unnecessary inner labor. Not adding affirmations, not forcing calm, but asking again and again, why am I carrying this? What am I refusing to accept? Acceptance, in Stoicism, is not surrender. It is accuracy. It is seeing the situation clearly and placing effort only where effort matters. Most people fear this step, because if you stop trying to control outcomes, you are left with something far more demanding: responsibility for your inner state. No one else to blame, no external lever to pull, just you and your choices. In the next part, we will talk about why people secretly resist this responsibility and how control becomes a psychological comfort, not a solution. Before moving on, consider this honestly. What are you mentally managing right now that you cannot actually command? You don't need a perfect answer, just a real one. If you want, leave a short comment, even one word. Awareness begins there. If letting go of control saves energy, why do so few people do it? Because control doesn't just promise safety. It offers comfort, and comfort is seductive. Marcus Aurelius understood something that still unsettles people today. The mind prefers familiar suffering to unfamiliar freedom. Read that again. Familiar suffering feels manageable, predictable, known. You know how to be anxious. You know how to worry. You know how to stay tense. But freedom, real inner freedom, requires something far more difficult than effort. It requires trust without certainty, and most people quietly avoid that. So instead, they hold on, they monitor, they overthink, they rehearse, they brace, not because it works, but because it feels like doing something. Control gives the illusion of participation. It makes you feel involved in outcomes even when you are powerless over them. That illusion becomes a psychological reward. You feel responsible. You feel vigilant. You feel prepared. But beneath that surface, something is happening. Your nervous system never fully rests. Marcus Aurelius warned that the mind becomes unstable when it refuses to accept its limits. Not weak, unstable. Because stability comes from knowing what belongs to you and what does not. Most people blur that line. They take responsibility for things they cannot influence and neglect responsibility for the one thing they can, their inner state. Let's be precise here. Stoicism does not teach indifference. It teaches clarity of ownership. Your actions are yours. Your judgments are yours. Your values are yours. Outcomes are not. Other people's reactions are not. Timing is not. Chance is not. When you confuse these categories, your mind carries unnecessary weight, and that weight feels like stress, anxiety, pressure, and fatigue. This is why control becomes addictive. Every time uncertainty appears, the mind reaches for control like a reflex, not to solve the situation, but to quiet the discomfort of not knowing. Marcus Aurelius noticed this reflex in himself. He wrote reminders not because he was enlightened, but because he was human. He needed to be reminded that peace is not created by managing the world, but by managing the interpretation of it. Ask yourself this: when something unexpected happens, what is your first reaction? Do you pause, or do you immediately tighten? Do you observe, or do you rush to explain, justify, or fix? That initial reaction reveals where your discipline lives. Control is fast. Observation is slow. And slowness feels dangerous to a mind addicted to urgency. But urgency is often a mask for fear. Fear of being unprepared. Fear of appearing incompetent. Fear of losing identity. Which leads us to a deeper layer. Most people do not control events to change reality. They control events to protect who they think they are. The competent one, the reliable one, the strong one, the one who has it together. Marcus Aurelius warned that identity is fragile. The more you defend it, the more anxious you become. Because identity requires constant proof. Freedom does not. In the next part, we will examine how identity quietly fuels the need for control, and why letting go of control feels like losing yourself. Before we continue, sit with this question. What part of your identity feels threatened when you lose control? You don't have to answer publicly, but noticing the question matters. When people say they want control, what they often mean is this: I want to protect who I believe myself to be. Marcus Aurelius understood that this belief is where much of our suffering begins, because identity feels solid, but it is actually one of the most unstable things you can cling to. Think about how you define yourself: competent, strong, independent, reliable, calm, successful. None of these qualities are wrong. But the moment your peace depends on maintaining them, you enter a constant state of defense. You start scanning reality for threats to your image. A mistake becomes dangerous. Criticism becomes personal. Uncertainty becomes intolerable. And so the mind tightens. Control at this level is not about events. It is about self-protection. Marcus Aurelius warned that the self-image is the most exhausting thing to defend. Why? Because it must be defended continuously. Every interaction becomes a test. Every outcome becomes a verdict. You are no longer simply acting, you are performing. And performance requires control. Control of impressions, control of outcomes, control of perception. But here is the quiet truth Stoicism reveals. The self you are protecting is not stable enough to protect you. It changes with mood, with context, with success and failure. Yet most people tie their worth to it. So when control slips, panic follows. Not because the situation is catastrophic, but because the identity feels threatened. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a person who understands themselves does not need constant confirmation. They act according to principle, not according to how the action will be perceived. This is a radical shift. It moves you from identity-based living to value-based living. Identity asks, how does this make me look? Values ask, is this aligned with what I choose to stand for? The first demands control. The second demands courage. And courage is lighter than control. Most people never notice this difference. They believe discipline means maintaining an image, but stoic discipline means releasing it. Releasing the need to appear calm. Releasing the need to be right. Releasing the need to be admired, not because these things are bad, but because they are heavy. Marcus Aurelius warned that the mind becomes enslaved when it seeks validation instead of alignment. Alignment with reason, alignment with character, alignment with what you can actually govern. When you live this way, something surprising happens. You still act, you still plan, you still take responsibility. But the emotional charge disappears. Mistakes no longer threaten who you are. Outcomes no longer define you. Criticism no longer destabilizes you. This is not numbness. This is freedom from unnecessary weight. In the next part, we will talk about why people resist this freedom, and why losing control can feel like losing meaning itself. Before moving on, consider this honestly. What identity are you constantly trying to maintain? Strong, calm, successful, needed? Notice how much energy it costs. Here is something most people never admit, even to themselves. Control doesn't just reduce anxiety. It gives life a sense of purpose. Marcus Aurelius understood this trap. When the mind lacks clarity about what truly matters, it fills the void with management. Managing outcomes, managing impressions, managing problems that don't belong to it. Busyness replaces meaning. Control replaces direction. And slowly, without noticing, your energy is spent maintaining motion instead of moving toward something real. Think about how often people say they feel lost. Not because nothing is happening, but because everything feels urgent and empty at the same time. This is the exhaustion of false importance. Marcus Aurelius warned that a life without inner order will seek importance everywhere else. So the mind clings to control as a way to feel relevant. If I manage this, I matter. If I hold this together, I am necessary. If I stay vigilant, I am useful. But usefulness without direction becomes strain. You can be busy all day and still feel deeply unsatisfied, not because you did too little, but because what you did was misaligned. Stoicism draws a sharp line here. It asks not, "What can I control?" but, "What deserves my effort?" This distinction is uncomfortable, because it forces you to confront something deeper than stress. It forces you to confront emptiness. Many people would rather feel anxious than feel unsure about meaning. Anxiety at least feels active. Uncertainty feels like standing still. So control becomes a coping mechanism. It keeps the mind occupied so it doesn't have to ask harder questions. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a person who knows their principles does not need constant stimulation. They act simply, directly, without excess. But when principles are unclear, the mind compensates with activity. This is why control can feel addictive. It creates the illusion of direction without requiring reflection. Yet the cost is high. Your days fill up. Your mind never rests. Your energy never returns because you are working without a center. The Stoic solution is not to abandon responsibility, but to reclaim purpose. Purpose is lighter than control. Purpose guides effort without demanding constant supervision. When you know what you stand for, you don't need to control everything else. You act. Then you release. Marcus Aurelius trained himself to return again and again to this question. Is this aligned with my values? Or am I just staying busy to avoid discomfort? Most people never ask this. And so they confuse exhaustion with importance. In the next part, we will explore why the modern world amplifies this problem, and how distraction turns control into a permanent state of tension. Before continuing, reflect on this honestly. What keeps you busy, but not fulfilled? You don't need a dramatic answer. Even noticing the question is enough. The modern world did not invent distraction, but it perfected it. Marcus Aurelius never faced notifications, feeds, or endless information. Yet he warned about something remarkably similar. A scattered mind cannot be disciplined, no matter how hard it tries. Distraction is not just entertainment, it is a coping strategy. When control becomes exhausting, the mind looks for relief, not through rest, but through escape. You scroll, you refresh, you consume, not because you enjoy it, but because it temporarily dissolves responsibility. Distraction offers something control cannot, momentary numbness, and that numbness feels like relief, but relief is not restoration. Marcus Aurelius warned that the mind weakens when it constantly shifts its attention, not because attention is fragile, but because it is wasted. Every time your focus fragments, your inner authority erodes. You become reactive instead of deliberate. This is why distraction and control are linked. The more control exhausts you, the more distraction you seek. And the more distracted you become, the less capable you are of discipline. It becomes a loop. Control, exhaustion, distraction, weaker discipline, more control. Most people live inside this loop without noticing it. They believe they are tired because they are busy. They believe they lack discipline because they are lazy. Marcus Aurelius saw the deeper truth. A mind that never rests in itself will search endlessly for stimulation. Distraction prevents you from facing something important. Silence. Silence exposes uncertainty. Silence exposes emptiness. Silence exposes unresolved questions. So the mind fills the space. But Stoicism teaches that silence is not the enemy. Avoidance is. A disciplined mind does not fear stillness. It uses it. Because in stillness, you regain ownership of attention. Attention is power, not because it controls outcomes, but because it determines what shapes you. Every thought you feed becomes part of your inner structure. Marcus Aurelius trained himself to withdraw attention from what weakens the mind, not forcefully, not angrily, but deliberately. This is where modern discipline must begin, not with doing more, but with allowing less noise, less unnecessary input, less mental clutter. Discipline is subtraction before it is effort. In the next part, we will look at how to reclaim mental energy without forcing control, and why restraint is more powerful than intensity. Before moving on, notice this. What do you reach for when you feel mentally tired, control or distraction? The answer reveals more than you think. The modern world did not invent distraction, but it perfected it. Marcus Aurelius never faced notifications, feeds, or endless information. Yet he warned about something remarkably similar. A scattered mind cannot be disciplined, no matter how hard it tries. Distraction is not just entertainment. It is a coping strategy. When control becomes exhausting, the mind looks for relief, not through rest, but through escape. You scroll, you refresh, you consume, not because you enjoy it, but because it temporarily dissolves responsibility. Distraction offers something control cannot, momentary numbness, and that numbness feels like relief. But relief is not restoration. Marcus Aurelius warned that the mind weakens when it constantly shifts its attention. Not because attention is fragile, but because it is wasted. Every time your focus fragments, your inner authority erodes. You become reactive instead of deliberate. This is why distraction and control are linked. The more control exhausts you, the more distraction you seek. And the more distracted you become, the less capable you are of discipline. It becomes a loop. Control, exhaustion, distraction, weaker discipline, more control. Most people live inside this loop without noticing it. They believe they are tired because they are busy. They believe they lack discipline because they are lazy. Marcus Aurelius saw the deeper truth. A mind that never rests in itself will search endlessly for stimulation. Distraction prevents you from facing something important. Silence. Silence exposes uncertainty. Silence exposes emptiness. Silence exposes unresolved questions. So the mind fills the space. But Stoicism teaches that silence is not the enemy. Avoidance is. A disciplined mind does not fear stillness. It uses it. Because in stillness, you regain ownership of attention. Attention is power, not because it controls outcomes, but because it determines what shapes you. Every thought you feed becomes part of your inner structure. Marcus Aurelius trained himself to withdraw attention from what weakens the mind. Not forcefully, not angrily, but deliberately. This is where modern discipline must begin, not with doing more, but with allowing less noise, less unnecessary input, less mental clutter. Discipline is subtraction before it is effort. In the next part, we will look at how to reclaim mental energy without forcing control, and why restraint is more powerful than intensity. Before moving on, notice this. What do you reach for when you feel mentally tired? Control or distraction? The answer reveals more than you think. At some point, something shifts. Not dramatically, not all at once, but quietly. You stop chasing calm, and calm begins to appear on its own. Marcus Aurelius described this state not as happiness, but as inner order. Order is different from calm. Calm can be forced, order cannot. Order emerges when things are in their proper place. Your thoughts, your values, your effort, your expectations. When these are aligned, the mind no longer fights itself. Most people try to feel calm without first creating order, so they meditate, distract themselves, numb themselves, while their inner structure remains chaotic. Marcus Aurelius warned that peace built on avoidance does not last. It collapses the moment pressure returns. But peace built on discipline does not need protection. It holds. This is where many people misunderstand Stoicism. They think Stoics suppress emotion. They think Stoics detach from life. In reality, Stoics detach from unnecessary struggle. They feel emotions, but they do not amplify them. They face difficulty, but they do not dramatize it. They act, but they do not cling. This is why Stoic calm feels different. It is not fragile. It does not depend on silence, comfort, or control. It depends on clarity. Clarity about what matters. Clarity about what belongs to you. Clarity about what does not. When clarity is present, control becomes unnecessary. You still plan. You still prepare. You still care. But the emotional tension disappears, because tension was never required. Marcus Aurelius trained himself to return again and again to this inner posture. I will do what reason demands and release the rest. This single sentence dismantles anxiety, not instantly, but steadily. It removes the internal argument that drains your strength. Over time, something else happens. You stop feeling the need to explain yourself, to justify yourself, to manage how you are perceived. Because your actions are no longer rooted in identity, they are rooted in principle. This is what people sense as confidence, not loud confidence, not performative confidence, but quiet stability. And quiet stability is magnetic. It is rare. Most people are visibly tense even when they smile, but a disciplined mind moves differently. It does not rush to fill silence. It does not panic when plans change. It does not collapse under uncertainty, because it is no longer trying to control life. It is responding to it. In the final parts, we will talk about how to live this mindset daily, not as philosophy, but as a practical way of moving through the world. Before we continue, sit with this. When was the last time you felt calm without trying to feel calm? That moment matters more than you think. At this stage, the question changes. It is no longer, how do I control my life? It becomes, how do I move through life without gripping it? Marcus Aurelius never taught withdrawal from action. He taught clean action, action without inner noise, action without attachment, action without self-dramatization. Most people live as if every decision is a test of their worth. Every outcome feels personal. Every obstacle feels unfair. Every delay feels like failure. This mindset quietly exhausts the mind because it turns life into a constant evaluation. Stoicism removes that evaluation, not by lowering standards, but by relocating them. The standard is no longer success or failure, it is alignment. Did you act according to reason? Did you act according to character? Did you act without betraying your values? If yes, the outcome becomes secondary. This does not make you careless. It makes you stable. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a person who understands this cannot be harmed by events, not because nothing bad happens, but because events no longer decide their inner state. This is the core shift. You stop asking life for permission to be calm. You stop waiting for conditions to improve. You stop postponing peace. You act fully, then you release. Release does not mean indifference. It means trust in your own integrity. This is what most people never experience. They try to secure peace externally. Stoicism builds it internally. Notice how this changes daily life. You still care about your work, but you are not consumed by it. You still care about relationships, but you do not lose yourself inside them. You still plan for the future, but you do not live inside imagined catastrophes. The grip loosens, and with it, energy returns. Because energy was never missing, it was trapped in resistance. Marcus Aurelius believed that the mind regains strength when it stops demanding certainty. Certainty is a burden. Presence is lighter. This does not make life easier. It makes it simpler. And simplicity is where endurance lives. Before we move to the final reflection, consider this carefully. What would change if you stopped tying your worth to outcomes? You don't need to answer perfectly. Just notice the direction of the question. If you take nothing else from this reflection, take this. You are not exhausted because life is heavy. You are exhausted because you are carrying more than belongs to you. Marcus Aurelius did not promise an easy life. He promised a lighter mind, and the mind becomes lighter the moment it releases the illusion of control. You do not need to dominate circumstances. You do not need to manage the world. You do not need to protect a fragile identity. You need only one thing: integrity of response. When your actions align with reason and values, the rest loses its power over you. The need to control fades because nothing essential is at risk. Life continues to change. People continue to disappoint. Uncertainty remains. But you are no longer fighting these facts. You are moving with them. This is where real strength lives. Not in tension, not in vigilance, not in constant management, but in steadiness. Marcus Aurelius trained himself to wake each day prepared for difficulty, not because he feared it, but because he refused to be ruled by it. He did not ask for a calm world. He built a calm mind, and that option is still available, not through force, not through control, but through clarity. If this reflection resonated, you are not alone. Many people feel this exhaustion but never name it. You did, and that matters. If you want to share, what part of your life feels lighter now just by seeing it clearly? You can leave a comment, not for agreement, not for validation, but for honesty. And if you want to continue this path, there are more reflections on this channel, not to motivate you, but to return you to yourself. Take what helps, leave the rest. The work continues quietly.